He didn't die because of the lie. He died because he needed it to look right. And that's where the story gets uncomfortable, because nothing was broken, nothing was chaotic, nothing was even suspicious. Everything looked aligned. People were selling what they had, bringing the money, laying it down. No speeches, no pressure, no one forcing anything. Just a very clear pattern. If you were in, you were all in. And that kind of clarity does something subtle. It doesn't create fear. It creates expectation, the quiet kind. The kind no one says out loud, but everyone feels. It's when everyone's aligned, and you decide to look aligned too. Because alignment here wasn't about image, it was about reality. But image is easier, faster, more controllable. And that's where the shift happens. Not in the action, in the intention behind it. Ananias saw what was happening. He saw the pattern. He saw the respect people were getting. He saw what this kind of action produced. And that's when the question changes. It's no longer, should I do this? It becomes, how will this look if I do? And that question is small, almost harmless. But it changes everything, because now the goal isn't just to participate, it's to present. And those are not the same thing. You can do the right thing and still be completely out of alignment. Because it's not about the action, it's about the version of the action. And versions are easy to control. You can adjust them, edit them, frame them, make them cleaner than they really are, technically correct, strategically incomplete. And most of the time, as that works, because people don't see intention, they see behavior, they see what you show, they believe what is presented. And that's where this becomes familiar. Because this isn't just about Ananias, it's about that moment when the version of you people see isn't actually you. And everything still works, everything still looks right, everything still fits. Until it doesn't. Because misalignment doesn't start with failure, it starts with adjustment, a small one, quiet, invisible. The kind no one notices, even you, at first, and that's why nothing here feels dangerous. There's no tension, no warning, no visible mistake, just participation, just involvement, just someone doing what everyone else is doing. Almost. Because the difference isn't in what he did, it's in why he did it. And why doesn't show up on the surface. It hides, it blends, it performs, until it gets exposed. And that's what makes this story different, because this wasn't about generosity, it was about control. Control of perception, control of narrative, control of how it would be seen. The problem wasn't giving, it was controlling how it looked. And once that shift happens, everything after that is just execution. Because the lie doesn't start when you speak, it starts when you decide what version of the truth people will see. And by the time the words show up, the problem is already there, fully formed, waiting. The lie didn't create the problem, it just exposed it. He didn't steal, he edited the truth. And that's what makes this part dangerous. Because nothing here looks extreme. There's no dramatic betrayal, no sudden collapse, just a very controlled version of reality. He sold the property, that part is real. He brought money, also real. He gave something, still real. So technically, everything checks out. Technically generous, strategically edited. And that's where the problem hides, because this isn't about what he did. It's about what he said he did. There's a difference between giving something and presenting it as everything, and that difference is small, almost invisible. But it changes the entire meaning, because now the action is no longer just participation, it's positioning. It's no longer, I gave. It becomes, I gave it all. And that's a different statement. A heavier one, a more valuable one, a more respected one, and most importantly, a more visible one. Because in that environment, what you brought wasn't just a transaction. It was a statement. It said something about you. And Ananias understood that. He didn't ignore the system, he understood it. And that's why this works so well, because this isn't reckless. It's calculated. He didn't refuse to give. He chose how the giving would look. And that's the shift. Subtle, clean, effective, because now he gets both. He keeps part of it and still receives the full perception. That's the strategy, and in most situations, it works perfectly. Because no one checks, no one questions, No one audits intention. People accept what is presented. They respond to the version they see. And that version was convincing, because it wasn't completely false. That's what makes it strong. It was built on truth, just not the whole truth. And partial truth is the easiest thing to believe, because it feels real. It looks real. It behaves like something real, until it doesn't. Because the danger here isn't the size of what was kept. It's the gap between reality and representation. And gaps like that don't stay hidden forever, especially not in a place where alignment actually matters. Because this wasn't just about money. It was about honesty inside a system that ran on trust. And trust doesn't break loudly. It breaks quietly, in small distortions, in slight adjustments, in carefully edited versions. And that's exactly what this was, an edited version of reality, clean enough to pass, close enough to believe, precise enough to avoid suspicion, but not real enough to hold, because eventually every version meets reality, and when it does, there's no room to adjust it anymore, no time to refine it, no way to control it. And that's where things start to shift, because the problem wasn't what he kept, it was what he claimed. The question wasn't aggressive, it was precise. And that's what made it impossible to escape, because there was no accusation, no raised voice, no dramatic confrontation, just clarity, the kind that doesn't chase you. It waits for you to answer. Peter looked at him, and instead of reacting, he asked. Simple, direct, unavoidable. Why? Not how much, not what happened, just why. And that's where everything shifted. Because questions like that don't attack behavior, they expose intention. And intention is harder to defend. You can explain an action, you can justify a decision, you can even reframe a mistake. But intention? That's harder to edit. Because now the version you created is being compared to what actually is, in real time, with no space to adjust it. And that's what makes this moment different. There's no time to prepare, no time to fix the narrative, no time to polish the version, because the truth is already there, and it's not waiting, it's just being revealed. It's when someone doesn't accuse, they just expose, and exposure doesn't feel loud, it feels final, because once something is clear, you can't make it unclear again. And that's exactly where Ananias stands, right between two versions, the one he presented and the one that actually exists. And for a moment, both are visible at the same time. And that's the tension, because now it's not about what he gave or what he kept. It's about the gap, the space between reality and representation. And gaps like that don't hold under pressure, especially not this kind, because this isn't social pressure, this isn't public opinion, this is clarity. And clarity removes options. No argument, just clarity. Because what Peter did wasn't investigation, it was recognition. He didn't discover the truth, he pointed at it. And that changes everything. Because now Ananias isn't caught, he's revealed. There's no confusion, no misunderstanding, no miscommunication. Just a very clear moment where the version collapses. And when a version collapses, you don't get time to rebuild it. Because the moment itself is the exposure. He controlled the story until the truth showed up. And when it did, there was no space left to manage it, no angle left to present, no wording left to adjust. Because this wasn't about information anymore, it was about alignment. And once alignment is broken in a place like this, it doesn't bend. It snaps. And that's what makes this moment so sharp, so fast, so final, because nothing dramatic happened, no scene, no escalation, just a question that removed every possible version except the real one. And when only the real one is left, there's nothing else to stand on. And that's when everything stops. No time to fix it, and because it was already over. There was no time to fix it because it was already over. And that's what makes this moment different. Because normally, there's a gap. A space between mistake and consequence. Time to explain, time to adjust, time to recover. But not here. Here, the moment the truth became clear, the outcome followed. Immediately. No delay, no second version, no chance to reshape what just happened, and that's what makes it feel abrupt, almost unfair, because it doesn't follow the pattern people expect. There's no process, no warning system, no gradual decline, just a direct connection between misalignment and result. And that's uncomfortable, because it removes control. There's no space to manage perception anymore, no room to soften the impact, no opportunity to reframe the narrative, because once the truth is fully exposed, there's nothing left to negotiate. And that's what happens here. Ananias doesn't argue, he doesn't defend, he doesn't even respond, because there's nothing left to say. When the version collapses completely, words don't help. They only confirm. And confirmation at this point changes nothing, because the consequence isn't reacting to what he said, it's responding to what was already true. And that's the key difference. This wasn't triggered by the lie itself, it was triggered by the misalignment behind it, the gap, the one that had been building too quietly and since the decision was made. And now that gap is gone. Not because it was fixed, but because it collapsed, instantly. It's when the distance between what is and what you presented disappears all at once. And when that happens, there's no transition, no adjustment period, just impact, direct, immediate, final. No follow-up meeting, no revision, no second attempt. Because this wasn't a process failure, it was a reality conflict. And reality doesn't negotiate, it doesn't adapt to your version, it doesn't adjust to your presentation, it simply reveals what is. And once it does, everything else becomes irrelevant. And that's why this moment feels so sharp, because it doesn't build, it doesn't escalate, it doesn't warn, it just happens. And when it does, there's no space left to do anything about it, because the moment itself is the result. And that's what makes this story so different from most, because usually consequences come later, after time, after repetition, after patterns. But here, there was no delay, because the environment didn't operate on appearance. It operated on alignment, and when alignment breaks in a place like that, it doesn't take time to show. It shows immediately, because there's nothing hiding it anymore, no version left, no presentation left, no control left, just reality. Clear, unfiltered, and final. And that's why there was no waiting, because the story wasn't continuing anymore. It had already reached its outcome, and yet, the impact of that moment wasn't finished. It wasn't just a lie, it was misalignment. And that's the part most people try to avoid. Because a lie is simple. You can measure it, label it, judge it. But misalignment? That's harder. Because it looks right, it sounds right, it even feels right. For a while. And that's why this story doesn't stay in the past. It follows. Because this isn't really about Ananias anymore. It's about that moment when what you present isn't what you are, and everything still works. People still respond, still respect, still believe, because they're not reacting to you, they're reacting to the version, and the version performs well. It's clean, consistent, convincing, built just enough on truth to feel real, and that's what makes it dangerous, because the problem isn't how big the lie is, it's where it happens. And this wasn't just any place, this was an environment built on alignment, where what you did matched who you were. No layers, no edits, no versions, just reality. And when something enters that space, carrying a version instead of truth, it doesn't blend, it distorts, even if no one sees it immediately, because distortion doesn't need attention to exist, it just needs time, and time usually protects it, gives space to adjust, refine, correct. But not here. Because this wasn't about exposure over time. It was about clarity in the moment, and clarity removes distance. It brings everything together. What is and what was presented, side by side. No space in between. And when there's no space, or there's no version, because once reality shows up, your version doesn't matter anymore. And that's what makes this uncomfortable, because it's not about how much was kept, it's about why it was presented differently. It's about the need to control how it looked, to manage perception, to be seen a certain way, even if it wasn't fully real. And that's familiar, Because it happens quietly, in small adjustments, in slight edits, in controlled versions, the kind no one questions, the kind that works until it doesn't. Because every version has a limit, a point where it meets reality, and when it does, it either holds or it collapses. And this one collapsed. Not because it was big, but because it was out of place. Small lie, wrong place. Because it's not about the size of the lie, it's about where it happens. And once it happens in a place where alignment matters, there's no room for versions, no space for adjustment, no tolerance for controlled perception, just reality, clear, unfiltered, final. He didn't die because he kept something. He died because he tried to control how it looked. And that's the part that stays. Because this story doesn't end with what he did. It ends with what it reveals. That being real matters more than looking right. Because the moment you start managing the version, you've already stepped out of alignment, even if everything still looks perfect. He didn't fail because he lied. He failed because he couldn't stay real where it mattered.